This is the One Thing Podcast, and I'm your host, Dr. Adam Rindy. The One Thing Podcast brings together leaders in functional and naturopathic medicine to discuss actionable information that may unlock puzzles in the areas of gut health, brain health, metabolism, and longevity. Please note, these episodes do not replace the opinion of your doctor. They are not intended to diagnose or treat any condition. Please discuss this information with your provider and discuss your own unique personal health history before adapting this information. Please subscribe to our episodes so that you can stay on top of the most current information in these areas of medicine. In today's episode, I welcome on Idan Ravin, author of The Hoops Whisperer and author of It Takes Patience. He is an elite performance coach for many of the top NBA players. He has a very unique life journey and also a gift for the craft of improving and fine-tuning performance. When I first heard of Idan, I was inspired by his ability to think out of the box and his ability to help his athletes push past boundaries. Please join me in welcoming this most special guest, Idan Ravin. Idan, welcome to the One Thing Podcast. And thank you so much for being here with me today.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Yeah, so I think if people aren't familiar with your story, it certainly is well documented. However, I'd love to just hear from you how you came to be what you are today.
All right, sure. So oftentimes when people ask me what I do, I say I've trained probably over 100 professional basketball players, 15 NBA All-Stars. And they look at me like I'm speaking Turkish or something. And I don't blame them for being pretty cynical, because I probably don't look like the guy that's trained most of the NBA All-Star team. I'm about 6 feet tall, I weigh about 180 pounds. When I stand next to these guys, people think I'm either a super fan or their accountant or their lawyer or their financial advisor or their agent or their manager or their publicist. Sometimes I get confused as their stylist, which actually I don't mind, or their private security guard because I have a bald head. But, they never sort of think that that's what I do. And I never played basketball in the NBA. I never played college basketball, Division I, Division II, Division III, nothing. The last time I played organized basketball was back in high school, where I was the best player at a religious Jewish school. Yeah, I'm talking yarmulkes and all that kind of stuff, and playing against other teams that wore yarmulkes. And back then, my only dream was to see Duke University coach Mike Krzyzewski and North Carolina coach Dean Smith pacing the sidelines, both wearing yarmulkes, arguing over whose scholarship that I was going to take. And obviously, that never happened. And even though my family is Jewish, we don't know the other famous Jewish families in professional sports. Adam Silver and David Stern never invited me to their house for Shabbat dinner. And I'm not the uncle, son, nephew, boyfriend, girlfriend, cousin, godson, homeboy, or teammate of anyone in professional sports. My professional, and actually that's often how people get jobs in that space in the first place. My professional background was, you ready for this? I used to be a lawyer, but just an unhappy lawyer hoping I could find something in life I love to do. And despite not having all these sort of credentials that everyone thinks is so necessary to break in and find success in sports, I was able to carve a niche for myself because, I felt like I had a lot of faith in myself, and I just kind of relied on a lot of intuition to kind of get where I am. I think it sort of started with, I grew up in a religious family. My mom's from Israel, my dad's from Russia, but then, moved to Israel when he was a child. They've devoted their whole life to teaching some form of Jewish education, whether that's Hebrew or Hebrew literature or Holocaust studies or the Old Testament or rabbinical commentary, comparative religion. And so, I grew up with lots and lots of religion. I went to Jewish schools. There was no one really around to teach me how to play basketball. It was a game I fell in love with when I was a kid. And I just found myself teaching myself how to play. Like, I would study old photographs to learn how to shoot a ball. I would go to the park and really teach myself like every bit of piece, from how to run and how to shoot and how to dribble, and just came up with drills and all that kind of stuff because there was no one there to sort of help me get any better. And I turned myself into a really good basketball player. I had opportunities to pursue playing basketball at other levels, but growing up the way I did, you can either become a rabbi, a doctor, a lawyer, an accountant, a teacher, engineer. So I kind of did what I was supposed to do, and I became a lawyer. And fast forward many years, I'm practicing law. I'm just really, it's not vibing with me. It's not what I want to do. I just don't know what I want to do. And I'm just, and you kind of grow up the way I do. You sort of tend to see things in the form of prayer, answers in the form of prayer. So I remember I was sitting behind my big lawyer desk, standing at a big pile of legal work, and I would just pray, and I would just kind of pray for an answer. I would find something in life that I really wanted to do. And I would hope that God would send down this lightning bolt that would impale itself on my desk, fill a big yellow Post-it note that would say, all right, Don, you're supposed to go from A to B to C to D. And there was no yellow Post-it note ever appeared, and there was no answers. I just didn't know what I was going to do. So one day I was leaving a local YMCA, and there was an ad on a corkboard for a 12-year-old boys basketball coach. And I jotted down the number. I called, and I volunteered as soon as I could. And I wasn't even sure that I'd be able to sneak out of the office because my billable hours were low. So I had to convince, the senior bosses that I was doing some type of business development, and I paid to have the jerseys stenciled with the name of the law firm on them. So here I am volunteering at this YMCA with these young kids. I've never coached anyone. I've never trained anyone. I just gave these kids drills I had created for myself when I was a kid. There were some running drills, some shooting drills, some dribbling drills, just kind of anything that I was sort of familiar with. And after a couple of weeks, I started getting calls from parents. They're saying, Idan, what are you doing with my kids? And I was like, what are you talking about? And they're like, I've never seen my kids so engaged, so excited, so focused. Normally my kids are spazzes. They're difficult. They get detention. What are you doing? So I just thought maybe I knew more than the dad who was coaching their other kids' teams. So then fast forward towards the end of the season, we went undefeated, and I get a call from a parent. And she says to me, Idan, can you come to practice early? I said, sure. So I get to practice early, and I see all these red cups and pizza boxes, and apparently all the kids had pooled their allowance money to throw me a pizza party. And I thought, wow, 12-year-old boys, they use their allowance money to buy video games, not to throw it indulge. You shouldn't be eating pizza in the first place, a pizza party.
Right.
And a parent pulled me aside and said, Idan, I don't know what you're doing. I thought, well, maybe I just know more than the other parent, who's coaching, or maybe I'm just a good teacher because I inherited a teaching gene from my parents. So fast forward another season, I'm volunteering. We're winning. Work is still crappy, but being able to be in the gym with these young kids was just a nice change of pace for me. So one day I come into the office, and the senior partner is holding this memo I had just written. And he calls me in, and he asks me a bunch of questions about the memo, and I answer. And he keeps asking me the same question about 10 times over and over, each time raising his voice another decibel. By the 11th time I'd had it, I was like, hey, no, bro, I'm done. I went back to my office, typed up the letter of resignation, and I quit. So I felt incredibly relieved because now I didn't have to practice law anymore, especially with this firm. And I moved home, and I'm thinking, okay, what am I going to do next? So I'm applying for jobs. Like, no one's even biting. I don't have enough of an expertise in anything. And I'm floundering. I don't know what to do next. And my mom and dad keep pressuring me to go back to law because that's what I know. And, to an immigrant kid who didn't grow up with much, a job is important because it represents a 401k, health insurance, check every 2 weeks, a business card, a desk. So after several months, I gave in and I took a job at another law firm, which ended up being a pretty amazing law firm, one of the best in the world. They treated me well. They paid me pretty decent. I got to travel some, but if I took all the lipstick off of it, it was still the practice of law, and I just wasn't feeling law. But while I was there, I did what I would always do to sort of self-medicate from being frustrated with work. I'd go to the park at night or in the mornings whenever I had free time. And I ended up running into a couple of kids I used to play ball with in the park. And years later, they were taller, bigger, faster, stronger, and now they were playing professionally overseas. And I don't know why I offered this. I said to them, hey, you guys want to go into the gym and work on a few things? And they were like, sure. So we got to the gym, and I gave them some running drills, some agility drills, some quickness drills, some shooting drills that I had created for myself when I was a kid. And they're like, Idan, this is great. Can we come back? I said, sure. And for the next 3.5 years, I probably met whoever called me whenever I had time. Early in the morning, late at night, on the weekends, I gave anyone who picked up the phone and called and wanted me in the gym anytime that I had. And after 3.5 years of doing this, I remember I was sitting down with my mom having lunch, and she asked me in her very thick Hebrew accent if I charged the players that I work with. And that question just hit me like a bunch of bricks. I was like, no way. I couldn't imagine, charging for something that I would otherwise do for free. My whole life I'd been making money doing what I hated. I couldn't imagine getting paid to do what I loved. And I discovered that I loved. So, my mom says to me at the end of lunch, she says, you're only worth what they're willing to pay for you. And the truth is that she was right. I just didn't have the courage to be able to raise that with them because I thought that once I did, something that I discovered that I loved would disappear along with them. So several months had passed, and I kept on thinking about my mom's words. And I just didn't have the courage to talk about money with anybody. And then one day I got a call from an NBA player who had just been cleared after an injury to get back on the court. And he texted me, "Don, would you make some time for me?" And I said, "Sure." And I said, as fast as I could, "Pay me whatever you think this is worth to you." He could have paid me with some chocolate chip cookies, some Starburst, some carrot cake. I would have been completely happy as long as I could have turned around and showed my mom that bag of sugar. And I worked with him that week. When we were done, we were sitting down, and he handed me an envelope, a white envelope, and I opened it, and it was a check with more zeros I had never seen. And I felt so uncomfortable, I wanted to push the envelope back across the table. And I couldn't accept it. My whole life I'd been making money doing what I hated. I couldn't imagine getting paid this much to do what I would otherwise do for free. And I just wouldn't accept the money. And eventually he insisted. He's like, Idan, this is what, you mean to me. This is how much you've helped me. And that moment was very poignant for me because it marked this end of this very circuitous sort of internship I had in myself. I had finally developed a methodology, a philosophy, an expertise, a confidence, and something that I could monetize. And then shortly thereafter, I quit the practice of law. And, for a long time, I've been doing this. And I tell people, I lived the most unimaginable life. I've been able to work with so many incredible players. I mean, from Lebron James to Kobe Bryant to Dwayne Wade to Stephen Curry and James Harden and Chris Paul and Carmelo Anthony and Kevin Durant, Blake Griffin, Dwight Howard. I mean, I've worked with so many Andre Drummond, so many great guys, so many great players. And so many opportunities sort of presented themselves from this. And, oftentimes, when people ask me, how'd you do it? I just feel like it didn't happen overnight. It didn't happen, without me failing a lot, without me just very frustrated and not knowing where this was going. But it just gave me so much joy. I just couldn't stop. And I think it's just more having a lot of faith in myself, having faith that, life will turn out, good for me, being resilient, relying on intuition and, not turning, I don't know, maybe it's in some ways stubborn. I never turned for anyone for help because I didn't think they were going to willing to help me because I was an outsider to that world. So I never went to clinics. I never copied anything. Everything I ever created, it was literally out of my own brain. Every single thing I ever did, it was never derivative. I didn't go on Instagram trying to find, cheat and copy other people's videos or on YouTube. It was just stuff that, I just gave a lot of thought to. And, all these years later, I just feel very blessed that I got a chance to do what I really enjoy.
That's an amazing story. Thanks for sharing.
No problem.
Yeah, it was after, reading your book when you sort of made that transformation from just sort of volunteering your time and helping all these people to getting paid. I could see how did you keep the pureness of what you do now that there's a transaction in place?
I don't think the pureness changes. I think I've always tried to keep the pureness through a level of just respect and privacy and giving my best and really trying to figure out how I can help and make a difference. I take every session serious. I see other people and their sessions are involved, how many people can they have in a room so they can take lots of Instagram videos? I just feel, I've always just tried to treat this as a very important time with me and the athlete. They trust me with something very important, not a moment of self-promotion. And I treat it with a lot of pride. I want to see them do well, and I want to see them excel, and they're a reflection on me too. So I think in that level, I've always been able to sort of maintain its purity because my intentions are honest with this. Yeah. When I was reading your book, I couldn't help but think about how a lot of what you do is almost like a diagnostician, but you also have an art in what you do and sort of an intuitiveness in your practice. And it reminded me a lot of, sort of what I do as a physician is, you get to know your people and what matters to them.
and what's important. And you do an assessment and come up with basically a plan and the goals. Can you talk about just kind of the general format of that?
Yeah, like I think I just, there's a big picture idea of what I want to accomplish, right? But I just don't know it until I check under the hood, right? And then every day, like there's stuff I want to accomplish, but I don't move forward until I address something that I might see. And so every day, like I'll see something that needs to be refined. And then that gets refined until we move to the next step. So it's like white belt, the yellow belt, the green belt, the blue belt, right? It's like, it's not about volume. It's not about like the work rate or always the intensity. Cause I feel like that's almost I don't know the word I'm looking for. It's like almost like you're thinking too far ahead if you're already focused on that. Like I oftentimes, like I'll just see people in the gym or trainers who I guess the focus is just try to kick the athlete's ass. And I think, man, that's not relevant. You know, like I think athletes always say Idan sessions are really, really, really challenging. But the intent is never to kick your ass. I mean, I could kick anyone's ass in 15 seconds. That's easy. Right? Like I can make anyone puke. I can get everyone exhausted. That's like the no-brainer. Right? The goal is performance and progression. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Not to run the car into the ground. And that's why I always try to be mindful of that and just always think like how do I what am I doing that's actually making them better? What am I doing? You know, obviously I spent some time with some soccer players, but I never Cristiano Ronaldo, but it's like, what am I doing in this session that's going to help Cristiano Ronaldo score 4 goals? My goal is performance, right? So if you can't articulate what is it that you're doing that's going to actually, help a player score 60 points or, a football player score 9 touchdowns or a soccer player score 4 goals. And I think you kind of have to reevaluate what you're doing.
Right. Yeah. I mean, one of the things that you've mentioned is really interesting because I think taking like a generalized approach to anything in performance is not really mimicking real life. And so what I've taken away from learning about your work is, you make things into kind of a real life situation. Like there's one point you said in your book, you talk about how you want to overwhelm the senses of your athletes because like in the middle of a NBA basketball game, it's not like they're sitting in a park with someone mowing the grass in the background.
Right. And I think it's like, but all those things have to have a bit of context, right? So in the beginning, you can't do that until you sort of establish a baseline of motor skills, right? And then from there, you can kind of progress things. But it's a series of progressions and regressions that just kind of happen throughout every session you spend with them. And it's just being sort of sensitive to how, you have an ultimate goal and it's just trying to feel like, how do you get there? And I oftentimes think that people just operate on some autopilot. They're like, all right, we're just going to give these 5 drills and then we're done for the day. And I'm thinking that just feels not customized. It feels like that's not how it works.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
Because be really attuned to like what they're doing. And if it's not working, then that drill, you punt on that drill. Mm-hmm. And you move to something else, either like same drill, more progressive, more regressive. Like I think you just constantly have to be like alive and kind of seeing what's going on, and not focused on on the video you're going to be capturing for your Instagram feed.
Yeah, it's really inspiring to hear that all, or if not all, you try to make most of your sessions off the radar. And maybe in some random gym somewhere. Yeah, I do. I try, And I think it's, I think that's where basketball is purest. When we're in any occupation, they say that character comes out when nobody's watching, right?
Yeah. And I'll tell you, I've had the biggest players in the world you would never imagine cry, show me things that they would never, ever show the world because we're alone.
Yeah.
I've had the most meaningful conversations. I've had the most meaningful connections. I've had the most meaningful sessions because it is a place of just quiet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I get that. And I think people who are listening to this, I think that one of the areas that might be interesting to talk about is this concept of performance, because there's all different philosophies of how to maximize performance, and there's a portion in your book where you talk about this coach that is kind of like elite players don't need to be trained, and they don't need to be coached. They are what they are, and you find sort of these gems with your clients to help them perform to the next level. Can you talk a little bit about that and how it might apply to just general people's life?
Yeah, I think, over the last, because I worked with so many of those great players that people say, oh, they don't have to do much. I'm thinking, really? It's one thing to get to the top, it's another thing to stay at the top. And I don't think people understand how extraordinary LeBron James is. I mean, people can criticize all they want. That guy is absolutely one in a trillion.
Mm-hmm.
He's been doing this for this long at this level. Everyone's gunning in for him every single night. The expectations are astronomical. He scores 22 and you think, oh, he's lost and he's old. I mean, it's like, and this idea that, oh, they don't have to do much. Oh my God, when you get to that level, you have to do even more, right? Especially when age starts to kick in. Over the last few years, I sort of pivoted a little bit. So, I've worked with a lot of the famous guys. I'm going to find guys that people have given up on to sort of, kind of prove my worth to myself and be like, I'm good at this. And I pick guys where people have sort of quit on. So, oh, forget it. A couple of years ago, Andre Drummond and I connected, and, he was in Detroit and he had put on 35, 40 pounds, and they'd given up on him. He was the worst free throw shooter in the history of basketball. They brought in the VR people and the AI people and the physics teachers and the chemistry teachers and the psychologists and the expert shooting coaches, and, still at 25%. And in 6 or 7 weeks, we got together. He lost 35 pounds. We changed lots of stuff. He started the season. It's the biggest jump in any statistical category in the history of basketball. I think he was at one point shooting 80-some%, and we almost never shot free throws. So I think I find those kind of moments to be, really challenging, and I'm really up for it. It's like people have given up, and I think, okay. I mean, last spring I was prepping Kelvin Johnson from Kentucky for the draft, and I would tell people, man, this kid's going to be awesome good. And, there were all the naysayers and the critics and this and that, and he ended up going 29, and he was obviously disappointed, and his family was disappointed, and I thought, I've done this a long time. I've never been wrong. I give a lot of thought to this, and this kid's going to be a stud. And he worked incredibly hard, and he got really good, and he was really devoted. And he's just a lot of things that he just does special. And seeing him the last couple of games during the bubble games, and we kicked butt, I thought, that's the kid I knew, and that's what I expect from that kid. And that kid's going to have a hell of a career. And so getting caught up in whether you go number 29 in the draft, or you go second round, or you don't get drafted, it's just all kind of silliness. I mean, I had another kid last spring who came in for a couple of days. Someone asked me to evaluate him. And the kid had played at Mississippi State, wasn't supposed to get drafted. And after an hour, I called his manager. I said, this kid's going to be an NBA player. He's like, are you serious? He's not on any draft. I go, trust me, he's going to be an NBA player. Lo and behold, Toronto was smart enough to find it. Masai was smart enough to agree. Kid's Terrence Davis, and he's contributing on the Raptors. So I like finding the unicorns. I like finding the people that have given up on and don't think that they have a shot anymore. Because I think I look for different things.
Yeah. And, I couldn't help but think about your classic training and how it makes you great. What I mean by that is, you grew up in kind of a very rule-oriented world, not only as
an Orthodox Jew, but also as an attorney. And I always think people who start with learning like rules can see between rules better than people who don't have any structure. What do you think about that?
I think.
Well, I don't mean that from a standpoint that everybody should become a lawyer or Orthodox Jew. What I mean is like that structure, that training of seeing those lines helped you. Maybe did it help you?
Well, I think those worlds give you structure and discipline and work ethic, right? And it's for you to decide what you want to do with those things, right? I think rules can be helpful, right? But the one thing that I like, my biggest takeaway from being from law school and lawyering is that you can't take a rule and apply it 100 yards for a touchdown. You can take a rule and apply it for 10 yards for a first down, and that's it. And I think what people don't want to do is they want to take maybe rules and just kind of make them universal application. And the answer is there is none. It's just the answer is always it depends, right? So, someone will say, what do you think about this? I'm thinking it depends. What do you think about that drill? It depends. Right? Like I remember I had created this drill that I first started doing with Chris Paul, then I did with Steph Curry, then Melo and Joe Johnson, and it was like it was featured on some show on like I used to do a lot of those NBA and tech stuff shows, and it was also featured in a Sports Illustrated article, kind of drill where I'm almost pushing on the shoulders of a player like a sled while you're dribbling it. And then all of a sudden, I see that drill appear all over the world. I see it in Gatorade campaigns, Under Armour campaigns. I see other trainers do it. And they're all it's something I created, right? And they're all copying it. And I'm thinking, you don't know why you're doing it, right? You just, like, you're taking this and you're applying it because it looks clever and kind of gimmicky, and you're making this sort of universal application to it. And I thought, that's the danger of copying. It's because you don't necessarily know why you're doing it. Start saying the same thing with the rule. Like, understand the rule and understand it has a limited application, right? And then figure out the next rule and that limited application. So, like someone will say, oh, yeah, push-ups are good. But I'm like, well, it depends, right? Like, what are you trying to achieve from the push-up? Like, what's the goal of the push-up? What's the athlete trying to get from the push-up? Like, how does the push-up work with the biomechanics of the athlete that you're working with? Like, the answers are always, it depends. And so it just requires you to be thoughtful and like why you're doing something and the application.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. I mean, in medicine, there's there's a saying that, every treatment's good if it's applied to the right thing. It's like you apply it.
Yeah.
The other thing I want to touch upon is that, I came from the world, I was in the world of competitive basketball. And one of the things that I learned from reading your book that I thought was very unique was how you never raise your voice with your athletes and how you kind of have a consistent personality. And I think I'd like you to talk about that, because communicating with athletes, if you're sort of kind of a rah-rah coach, sometimes it works. Eventually they tune it out. And sometimes, it's right. And sometimes, there's always, like we said, a proper application. I'd like to just kind of hear about your personality. You seem very perceptive, intuitive, kind of sensitive to what the athlete's going through on any given day. And how has that helped you with working with these elite athletes?
I guess I just try to do what makes sense to me. I've never been like a super loud, draw a lot of attention to myself, like yell, scream kind of person. It just doesn't feel right. So I guess I'm not necessarily soft-spoken, but I don't use lots and lots of words. I try to stay pretty even keel. I try to be honest, sincere, earnest, direct, thoughtful, analytical with them, and helpful. But I don't even feel comfortable yelling. Like that wouldn't be me, right? Like I don't feel like I have to rah-rah like that. I mean, I can be pretty poignant and inspirational without having to raise my voice. And I think, like if someone needs that, I wouldn't be the right fit for them.
Yeah.
Because I'm not going to curse at you. I'm not going to insult you. I'm not going to, I'm not going to do that, right? Like I think we just got to vibe because we love this and we love what we do and we're really curious to get better, right? Mm-hmm. And then we're to explore lots of different things and it'll be unconventional, be hard. But like I just, trust me and make sure you have lots of dialogue, right? And things are going to feel weird and going to be strange, but I can assure you it's going to really help. And I think that's kind of my spirit, right? Like I don't believe in that hard coaching thing where, you make them puke in garbage cans and you break them down and break them to build them back up. And I don't know, that just feels kind of foreign. I think you just have to do a better job of deciding if it's a good fit for you, the athlete.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, this has been really insightful. Thank you. I would love to just hear some take-home messages for us, and then also hear about what you're up to. Anything that you'd like to tell us about how people can follow you. I know you have a new book that you just released. I'd love to hear a bit about that.
Yeah, sure. So, the book first that you're referring to is called The Hoops Whisperer, and I sold it to Penguin Books a few years ago. And the book is essentially about sort of the importance of relying on faith in a non-religious context and intuition when trying to find your purpose in life. And on a micro level, it's kind of, it's sort of a quasi-memoir on how I went from one universe I didn't really belong in to another one I didn't really belong in either. And it's sort of this anecdotal how my life has intersected with a lot of these athletes. And I recently released a children's book that's been in my mind for a long time and I'm just really proud of. And the book is called It Takes Patience, and it's available on Amazon. And it's about, it's another sort of book, I guess, about faith, but it's like faith in finding our voice. And it's about the relationship of a little girl and her grandmother and how she learns to find her voice. And I think it's very poignant during these challenging times right now because it's, it features a multiracial girl that grows up in a small town in Appalachia and how she's just trying to find her way during tough times. And it's about the mindfulness of children and about the idea of, how sometimes the most thoughtful answers come through struggle. And it's just something like I've been very proud of and excited to share. In terms of the sort of take-home messages, I think it's more about, I'd say I encourage people to just try to see things differently and ask lots of questions you normally wouldn't ask. I remember doing an interview a while back and I always thought, God, why don't we put like ketchup and mustard on our hamburgers? Like, why can't we put honey? Right? And I think it might sound like kind of like sort of a simple sort of like example, but that's what it requires. Like I ask myself, I question things all the time and I try new modalities all the time because I think why does my hamburger only have to have ketchup and mustard or relish? Right?
Right.
That just seems like, I don't know. I mean, obviously all those are fantastic, but why can't it be different? Right? And I think part of that is maybe why I've been able to kind of find a lot of joy in this is because I really try to find the unusual and kind of turn it into my own special sauce and put honey on all my burgers.
Love that. That's such a great analogy. And thank you very much for sharing this insight. And I look forward to continuing.
If anyone wants to reach out, they can always reach out to me on Instagram. It's IDANWAN, Idan Wan. You can find me the same name on Twitter if you want to direct message me. I also have a website, IdanRavin.com. So you can always message me there. I respond to everybody. I look forward to talking to people. And hopefully, this is giving some folks like something to think about and, on their way to find their own magic.
Excellent. Yeah, and I will put those links in our show notes for everybody. So, and also link to your the new book, It Takes Patience. So Well, thank you for your time, and I look forward to following your career and hopefully catching up sometime down the road.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me, buddy.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this week's episode of the One Thing Podcast. Please share these episodes with your friends, loved ones, colleagues, patients, healthcare providers, anyone who you feel might benefit from hearing these informative interviews. We tend to learn best from people sharing things with us. That's often the first time it's introduced. So don't hesitate if the content of these episodes reminded you of someone that might benefit from it. Forward the episode to them, and I'm sure they'll either appreciate it or be appreciative that you've thought of them. So once again, we'll look forward to seeing you next episode on the One Thing Podcast. And again, much appreciation for you being here with me.